What's up, everyone? I'm here with my NFL Week 3 Sleeper/Value DraftKings picks. As always, if you have not seen my main picks video where I pretty much cover the entire slate, there will be a link down in the description below. Also, in this video, we usually cover guys that I think are being slept on and players that I think present a lot of value given their price on DraftKings. So let's not waste any more time and let's go ahead and get to this week's picks. All right, so moving into my first pick here, I have DeAndre Hopkins. All right, hear me out. I know he's facing the Patriots. I know he's facing the Patriots on the road. I know the Patriots are notorious for trying to lock down and funnel their defense to the #1 receiving option. But if you look back at the first 2 weeks of the season, 16 targets in week 1, 13 targets in week 2. These are things you can't ignore. And adding the fact that he's only $6,200, I have to consider this guy in GPPs. I just do. Look, I know he's not being as efficient with these targets as we would like him to be. You know, he only has a 48% reception percentage right now, but he's getting almost 50% of all of this team's targets. No joke, he's getting 48% of the workload. That's almost 20 points higher than Antonio Brown. You have to consider this guy, okay? Now, with the way this game should unfold, a lot of people are expecting it to be an early blowout. I'm not so sure. I mean, we could see it like that, but you have to think that this Texans defense is stingy, right? They're not bad. They got shown up kind of, against the Jaguars in week 1. That was kind of a fluke in my opinion. That's going to be a major outlier for this team just because of how bad their offense was that week. It was putting their defense in a lot of bad spots with the turnovers and different things along those lines. So I like Hopkins in this spot. You have to figure a realistic stat line for Hopkins in this game, in my opinion, is 12 targets, 6 receptions, and like 85 yards or so, and possibly a receiving touchdown. And if you get that at 6,200, you're not going to complain. Okay, I've even considered playing Hopkins in cash games. I've pretty much decided I'm not going to do that. I don't have anywhere near enough confidence. But targets is what I'm looking for every single week in players in cash. But this is just a guy who's not efficient enough with his targets for me to feel comfortable. But, if this happens to be a game where he catches, 10 of those 13 targets, gets 120 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, I don't want to miss it, especially at this price. He has the most targets in the NFL. He does have 3 red zone targets, which is, tied for a bunch of people. I think it's like borderline top 10 in the NFL. Obviously, the Texans haven't been in the red zone much. But I'm definitely interested in DeAndre Hopkins. Definitely only play him in GPPs. But, definitely am looking at him this week. I'm also looking at his teammate here in Lamar Miller. And this is a really, really dark horse sleeper play, okay? Because Lamar Miller has not looked very good in his Texans career, in my opinion. He had 21 touches in week 2, had 19 touches in week 1, and pretty much put up a very identical stat line. He had 11.6 DK points in week 1, 11.7 DK points in week 2. But the big benefit we're looking at here with Miller this week is the benefit of him catching passes. Foreman has looked pretty good on the ground, and he may take away a few carries. But like I said, really the benefit of Miller here is not his running ability, it's his pass catching ability. And it probably hasn't been as documented as well towards the Patriots as it has towards the Falcons, but the Patriots too are a team that does not do very well against the pass catching running back. And although Miller is not, let's say, an elite dual threat running back, he is somewhat of a threat back there. I'd like to think the Texans are going to try to get the ball out of Deshaun Watson's hands quickly so we can try to limit his mistakes as much as possible. A lot of short dink and dunk throws. I would like to think that Lamar Miller is going to get at least 5 targets in this game. He's only had 5 targets so far all season, but he's caught all of them. So I mean, I'm going to take a chance on Miller in a GPP. It'd probably only be like a lineup or 2. If you're playing a ton of lineups, I really wouldn't go more than like a 1% of exposure to him in your lineups. But I definitely like Miller in this spot, especially if they're having to throw the ball a lot, because Foreman is not going to be on the field when they're in an obvious passing situation. So because of that, Miller gets a bump up. He's pretty cheap. Like I said, certainly not the ideal spot for either of these players, but they're so cheap, and I would like to think they're going to get a decent amount of workload. Of course, with Lamar Miller, there's a chance he could get, a couple of red zone carries in this game and maybe sneak one in for a touchdown. That would give you pretty good value here. So both of these guys are just too cheap for the potential upside they have if they're getting blown out. So I like both these players. Let me know what you're thinking. But I'm definitely going to be looking more at DeAndre than I am Lamar Miller. But I think Hopkins or both of these guys are pretty good GPP plays. All right, so next up I have Devin Funchess, and this is a guy that I alluded to a little bit in my main picks video. But right now at 4,200, his price is exactly the same as it was last week. And we saw a little bit of a glimpse of what we were going to get out of Funchess without Greg Olsen on the field. Last week, he set a new career high in routes run. His snap percentage is the highest it's ever been so far this season. And we can only expect that to continue to trend upward as Greg Olsen's not going to be on the field. Last week, this guy had 7 targets, 68 receiving yards, only 4 receptions though, but still was able to put up 10 DK points. And honestly, I'm considering him in cash games. That may seem a little bit crazy, but let's say Cam throws the ball 25 times in this game. We have to assume that 7 or 8, if not more, are going to go towards Kelvin Benjamin. I think Funchess is actually likely to see 7+ targets in this game. Then you have to assume 5 or 6 will probably go towards Christian McCaffrey, and then everybody else will kind of get one sprinkled in here and there. Like Russell Shepard, Ed Dixon may get a few, and who knows, maybe even Jonathan Stewart will get one thrown his way a few times as well. So and that's on the lower side. If we're at 25 attempts, we have to assume he may throw more than that. I expect Cam to likely get closer to 30 pass attempts in this game. So because of that, I like Funchess in cash. I think he does have some upside as well. This is a guy who historically has not caught a lot of passes in bulk, but tends to be pretty effective in the red zone. So we could see a weird stat line where he only catches 4 or 5 passes, but 2 of them are for touchdowns and like 25 receiving yards or something weird. Or we could see a stat line where he catches 7 or 8 passes, for 68 yards, like he had last week, but also gets in the end zone once. So honestly, at 4,200, you don't need too much out of him. And at this price for a guy who likely is going to see at least 7 targets, he's very cash playable, but he also has touchdown upside. This is also a guy who was a former tight end in college at Michigan. So maybe we could see him running some slot plays that were initially designed for Greg Olsen. That could be a plus for him as well. I don't know if that's going to actually happen. I haven't heard. I also haven't even mentioned that the Saints are going to be missing their top cornerback, which is kind of a joke anyway, but their best corner is Marcus Lattimore. He's not going to be playing in this game. Plus, they're going to be missing a couple of tackles, so that could help out the Panthers' defense here as well. So I personally like Funchess in this spot. I'm considering him in cash heavily, and GPPs, you definitely have to consider him if you want to stack somebody with Cam. Also, Cam was listed as questionable. I've already heard Ron Rivera say that he's going to play, so I'm not really too concerned about Cam not playing in this game. And honestly, I really don't know what to think if he's not going to be mobile or not, but still, I expect Cam to be in the pocket quite a bit in this game anyway. I expect the Saints to try to contain him and not let him, break contain too much. So anyway, I like Funchess a lot. Let me know what you think. All right, so moving into our second set of players here, I have Eric Ebron, and he's actually become a pretty popular play, I think. So because of that, I'm looking at more of a value play here for him. So at 3,300, if you really want to just go cheap at tight end, this is probably your best bet. I've even flirted with maybe playing him and another tight end in my cash lineup. I don't think I've ever done that actually, at least in recent memory, where I've played 2 tight ends in a cash lineup. But this week, you have quite a few different tight ends. There's expensive tight ends at the top that have really good matchup. There's some guys down at the bottom that we could see get a little bit more exposure to the passing game than we usually would. So I like Eric Ebron. He had a good game last week, so that's why we haven't seen. He played on Monday, so that's why we haven't seen his price rise at all. He's going to be facing the Falcons here, who once again I talked about it earlier with the Patriots. Falcons too are a team that really like to funnel towards the team's #1 receiving option. Now the interesting thing about the Lions here is they really don't have I guess Golden Tate would technically be their #1 receiving option, but they have really 3 serviceable wide receivers now if you include Galladay, which he came out of nowhere in my opinion. He was kind of a preseason stud and he's really translated to the regular season pretty well, but honestly, you don't need much out of Ebron at this price. He had a good game last week, 5 targets, caught all 5 of them, 42 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown, was able to put up 15 DK points. I think all of his buyers would love to see that stat line again this week. The one thing that is nice about Ebron is he has pretty solid speed for a tight end, so he could break free. He only has 1 red zone target, but he caught it, and that was last week. So he's pretty quiet in week 1. Only had 3 targets, 2 receptions for like 9 yards, and that's the one thing that scares me about this guy is, so far his first few seasons in the league, we haven't really seen much, but he's still pretty young. You got to remember, this guy is like 23 or 24 years old, I think it is. So he still has plenty of time to reach his potential, which I think he still has a pretty high ceiling for what he could be, especially with a guy like Matthew Stafford. But historically, I really don't think Stafford has liked throwing to his tight end all that much. So hopefully we can see that kind of rise here this week. but I actually am considering Ebron in cash. So if you still want to stack somebody with Stafford in cash games, this could be a good route. Or if you want to kind of go cheap in your flex spot, maybe play 2 tight ends in a GPP lineup, then Eric Ebron may be a good option as well. All right, so next up I have Isaiah Crowell, and if you're ever going to play Crowell, this is the week to do it, okay? So far this season, he has not been good. I mean, let's face it. And honestly, Crowell is not a bad running back in my opinion. He just never gets to really showcase what he can really do because the Browns are always playing from behind and are always in obvious, passing situations. And because of that, we see Duke Johnson on the field majority of the time. Crowell's not necessarily bad at catching passes out of the backfield, but it's pretty obvious Duke Johnson is the preferred guy there for the Browns in that particular role. The Browns offensive line has looked pretty good so far this season. I've been pretty impressed, as they should be good. They've spent a lot of money. I'm pretty sure they're spending the most money on their O-line than any other team in the NFL. So because of that, I'm going to take a chance on Crowell and some GPPs. Really what we're looking for out of him is to get 2 touchdowns, right? That's where all of his value comes from, is to get into the end zone. Also Crowell recently just went to Hugh Jackson and asked for more carries. A couple of beat writers that I was reading about said that Jackson promised more carries. So if that happens, I'd like to see Crowell get over 20 rushing attempts in this game. You have to assume he's going to get all of the red zone and goal line touches as well, because they don't really prefer to go to Duke Johnson there. So if he can get over 20 rushing attempts in this game and get me, really all you need is like 60 to 70 rushing yards and a pair of touchdowns, he'll smash value at 4,800. And in a GPP lineup, if this guy scores 2 touchdowns, if he does nothing else, if he gets you 20 rushing yards and scores 2 touchdowns, which he's definitely going to get more than 20 rushing yards in this game, assuming he gets more touches, then he's going to, really help your lineup a lot. He's not going to be owned. Everybody's looking to attack this Colts defense through the air, especially if Vontae Davis can't go. So for me, I like taking a chance on Crowell this week. All right, so finishing up here with AJ Green, and yes, I know he's not particularly being slept on, and I know he's not really that good of a value, but I didn't talk about him in my main picks video, and it seems a little bit criminal not to talk about AJ Green in this spot. AJ Green has 18 targets on the season so far. We have to assume his workload is going to go even higher because there's no John Ross, and the big one, there's no Tyler Eifert. I've heard some people flirt with the idea of playing Brandon LaFell. Honestly, if I have to play Brandon LaFell to win a GPP, I don't want to win because, I just can't play Brandon LaFell. I have no confidence. And a lot of people are thinking that because they're like, oh, well, there's no Eifert, there's no John Ross. They have no big play explosion guys except AJ Green, so you have to assume the Packers are going to be all over him. And I do expect that, but at the same time, I expect Andy Dalton just to chuck up a couple 50-50 balls. And honestly, when you're throwing a 50-50 ball to AJ Green, it's really like a 70-30 ball, honestly, because he's going to come down with it more times than not because that's just how good he is. So I'm definitely going to be playing AJ Green in GPPs. I flirted with the idea of playing him in cash, but I just can't bring myself to do it now that I know that Ross and Eifert are going to be out. So we're going to have to see how this game goes. If it turns into an early, ugly blowout, we can expect AJ Green to get a lot of targets. I expect him to get a lot of targets regardless. I think he's going to get over 10 targets in this game. 8,100. Let's take a chance on him in GPPs and see what happens. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like. I'm going to drop a whole bunch of links down in the description below. Be sure to check all of those out if you haven't. Be sure to follow me on Twitch. I do think I'm going to live stream tomorrow. We can kind of make a group lineup or something along those lines. I'll be sure to upload a quick little 10-second video or something on YouTube to let you guys know. Also, if you haven't checked out my main picks video, there'll be a link down there as well. Like I said earlier, follow me on Twitter. You can ask me questions there. That's probably the best spot to do it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Later.